On today's episode of The Table of Content, Mike and I open up the short story Be a Man by James G. Bruen Jr. And we're going to ask that exact question. What does it take to be a man? Stay tuned, that's coming up next, right here on The Table of Content. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Table of Content. I am Albert Saenz, joined by Mike Thimons. Mike, hello.
Hello, Albert. So great to be back.
Always good to talk with Mike Thimons because Mike Thimons has great insight in his own particular way. So thank you for offering your insight and your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, my first concern is for the audience who heard Be a Man and thought that we were going to talk about the song from Mulan. And I want to make sure that everyone knows we are not discussing a Disney movie today.
Wait, what? Oh, okay.
Have you not seen Mulan?
I thought we were talking about the Disney movie. We're going to talk about something else?
Oh, great. We're going to have to...
I'm just kidding. I was actually the one to read this. I was surprised when you sent it to me, and I listened to it. It's been a few years, but I read the Be a Man, and it brought me back to glory days.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard the story, go find it at our website at waobaudiotheater.org under Door-to-Door Storytellers, or visit our YouTube page for WAOB Audio Theater and find Be a Man. And as Mike said, yes, he was the one who gave sort of voice and life to this story. It has been a few years for him. But do you remember the recording? Do you remember working on it at the studio?
Initially, I couldn't believe it. I thought, did I really do this? And then, my voice has gotten a little deeper over the years, so I wasn't even sure it was me. But it truly was, and it did bring back a lot of... Right away, I was like, okay, I know this story. The kid didn't count the 3. There's a huge fight that breaks out, and it's just that age-old question, what is a man? It just really comes to the surface.
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and open up the story just a bit more? You kind of started talking about it, there was a miscount, but why don't you explain the story shortly for our listeners?
Sure. Well, to start off, it's a normal, what was it, a flag football game?
Yeah, it was touch football. It was touch football.
Touch football, okay. And just a little thing happened where the two characters are Joe Jakes and Jimmy Brennan. And Jimmy Brennan accused Jakes of not counting to 3 before he blitzed the quarterback. And this just escalates out of control. All of a sudden, they're tackling each other. They're throwing punches. Everyone else is just watching, wondering what is going on. Yeah, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, so basically, the boys continue on through this, kerfuffle, throwing blows, having a fist fight. And one of the boys, of course, eventually just, it's Jakes, Joe Jakes. He ends up getting up because he got hit a little too hard and takes off towards his home. Now, the interesting thing is eventually Joe Jakes returns, but he comes back with his father, and his father was basically pushing him to finish the fight. That's what it says, right? So the line from the story is they come back, and his dad says, "Finish the fight," he commanded them. "Don't lose," he instructed Jakes. He folded his arms across his chest and stared down at his son. "Be a man." So Joe Jakes goes back, and he went and basically, started the fight, but he sort of went for, to end it all, and he got Jimmy in a particular place, and eventually he acquiesces, and then the father says, "Don't ever let anyone beat you, boy." The man grunted at his son. Then the man stomped off, returning to his house. So the boys get up from there, and they sort of make up. They sort of like,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, and it wasn't fair, and I know, and Dad made me do it, and I know, and it's okay, and you know, you won, and you shouldn't have made me do it. And so they have this discussion, right? But what ends up happening is there's this line that Joe Jake says. He says, "Still friends," and he holds out his hands, and Jimmy says, "You bet," and they
Right.
continue on their game. And there's this fun little line at the end. It says, "It's not dark yet," said Jakes. "Want to get back in the game? Yeah, only if you promise to count to 3," grinned Brennan. Ha ha ha. Okay, and the music trails off, and they're friends forever.
Right.
So again, as a whole, we've got a story about two boys had a fight, then this dad comes in for Joe Jakes, and then he sort of tells them, be a man and finish the fight, and don't lose. And the boys
Right.
do their fight, and they make up. So, but the question here, like, really, I mean, there's two sides here. I'm sure this is sort of standard fare for a fair amount of kids, like even siblings, right? I mean, whether it's friends or
Hmm.
siblings, you get argumentative and you have a fight, and I don't want to be your friend. I'm not your brother anymore. I'm not your sister anymore. And you just sort of make up and you move on about your life. And kids sort of have this natural ability to sort of heal for the most part. I know that I see my kids, right? They're playing with Legos, and someone takes their Lego, and they get mad, and you're not my brother anymore. And but then
Right.
2 minutes pass, and they're laughing and playing again. They're building.
It's so amazing how quickly kids can forgive. I remember being a kid and yeah, one of my siblings upset me and I was like, I am never talking to you again for the rest of my life. I like had that feeling. And then literally 5 minutes later, like we're playing together and I'm just like, why can't why can't we always live like that? Just kind of shrug things off.
Right. And I think that, the first part there is that while kids in their own sort of, sensitive, emotional place, are unique in particular, and they're still figuring out their emotions, and they're still figuring out what's kind of fully right and what's wrong. They have a sense of they want to be accepted, and they
Mhm.
want to be forgiven, and they also know how to forgive. And there's something very sort of beautiful about that, right? About the ability of children to sort of have a disagreement, but then be able to move on because they know that there's something better. And maybe they can't explain it, but they just know this person that they like, that's their friend, that's their sibling, whatever, is someone they actually do want to be with. And to just
Right.
have that ability to just sort of forgive freely, it just speaks a lot sort of to the innate sort of mercy that I think Christ puts inside of us. Like,
Mhm.
you know but children are able to actually take advantage of it. As adults, we grow up and we get out of that. They're like, I'm not forgiving him. And we're gonna, I'm gonna hold a grudge for the rest of my life against this person. And
Right.
so we live in this sort of perpetual sort of grievance with this person, and it's really hard for us to forgive. But kids sort of embody it like really well. Like, hey, I'm gonna forgive this person. Like, they said sorry, and I want to play with them. If only
Mhm.
we could sort of duplicate that ourselves as adults.
Exactly. And it's interesting that the it was the adult in the story that really seemed to be the one holding anger. Some people can like hold a grudge for so long. It's kind of amazing. Um, and they even forget like what the initial reason was. Like decades pass and they're like, I don't even remember what it was. And then they're like, wait, it was like over a pair of shoes or something. And they literally won't speak to somebody over something so trivial. Um, and yeah, like you said, it's amazing how little children can teach us so much. And both of these boys, like they were clearly upset with each other towards the beginning. Um, Obviously they're throwing punches, but how quickly they came to a conversion of heart, and they were just like, "Let's. This isn't worth holding on to. Like the reason that we're playing is ultimately to have fun. This isn't to, um, I don't know, kind of prove anything like the father seemed to suggest."
And let's get into that. Let's get into the father, because I think that gets to the big
Yeah.
question of our discussion. So the father comes back with Joe Jakes. He says basically, get in there, win the fight, and don't let anyone
Mhm.
don't let anyone beat you, right? There's that line, be a man.
Right.
So the first question, and I'll play one side, is I'll ask you, do you think, Mike Timmons, that winning a fist fight is the sort of the basis or one of the strong points of being a man?
You put me on the spot with that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, I did. I want to see what you have to say. That's why I put you in the spotlight.
Yeah, that is a good question. I I'm gonna answer that quickly and just say no. But to get into it a little bit more, that's definitely the way that the world thinks. You fight until you win, and whoever wins, um, they're the more manly person. That's competitiveness. That's manliness. That's proving that you're better than others. Um, but at the end of the day, it's like, what is actually, I don't know, more manly, more mature? Are those synonyms? I don't even know. I'm gonna.
I don't have I
I would
don't
hope
have a
so.
thesaurus on me at the present.
I would hope that they go hand in hand. Is like manliness and emotional maturity, where you can be a gracious loser or you can be like a modest winner, and realize that like just because you lost doesn't mean that you're a failure. And just to be a gracious loser, I think like that's not a sign of weakness, but that's a sign of strength.
Sure.
Um, yeah, and I work here at the radio station, and we have a priest on a lot, Father Rudy. He's so great, and he talks about um, he used this example of, say, like a dog was barking viciously at you. Like if you bark back, that is a sign of like of weakness because you're lowering yourself to that dog's level. But if you can the example he used was like the dog's barking and you can kind of ignore it because you're not going to engage in a fight with a dog. you're you're realizing that you're kind of like you're worth more than that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
that.
no, it makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, where are you at, you know, from a maturity level when it comes to some sort of interaction, especially if it's one that could be confrontational, Do you,
Right.
do you have the ability maybe to even just can you walk away from a situation, and say, I'm I'm manly enough, to be able to walk away and not have to fight about it. So in this particular instance, right, we have
Mhm.
where the dad comes and he's like, you know, you're only a man if you finish this fight, and he sort of has to finish it in a
Mhm.
really sort of, I don't want to say brutal way, but a really intense way, right? So Jake's tackles Brendan, and it says Jake's head Brendan flat on his back with his knees on Brendan's shoulders. Say, Uncle, he demanded, right? So I mean, he has him pinned in a
Right.
really sort of intense way, knees on shoulders, and he's forced to sort of give in, right? And and the father is satisfied with this. Like, all right, good, way way to be a man, like basically,
Mm.
you know, being the stronger opponent. And I think that what the father in the story loses is that is there's nothing to be proud of. There's no actual victory here when you've just sort of completely obliterated your opponent, right? So
Right.
like instead of, hey, let's come to terms. Let's have a discussion. Let's find a peaceful resolution, or at least let's accept that we're going to agree to disagree. You know, the father is very one sided. It's like beat him good, and
Mhm.
you're a man. There's no in
Right.
between. But it just can't be the right answer to being a man. I mean, if we look at scripture, if we look at the New Testament, like Christ did not sort of tell his followers and disciples like beat your opponent squarely, until they cry uncle. Jesus himself, right? I mean,
Hmm.
what did he do? He didn't go and like beat the tax collectors. He didn't beat the Pharisees, and he didn't beat all the sinners that came to him. He said, "Hey,
Mm,
I'm going to hang out with you. I forgive you. Your faith has saved you." That's a far difference from, finish the fight and don't lose. So, I think that the ability to sort of approach a situation with sort of love and charity, even if there's going to be an argument, even if there's going to be some version of a fight, but to approach it with, hey, I'm coming in here with a heart that's, on the side of understanding, charity, love, peace, keep going on the words. I think you find a better
right.
path to being a man.
I totally agree. But there's still part of me that I guess it's listening to an older generation. I know my parents or my dad, like when he came home from school as a kid, like there'd constantly be fist fights breaking out. That was just how the kids settled things. Personally, I mean, I'll admit I have never gotten in a fist fight. Maybe that's weird. Um, and part of me thinks like maybe, maybe there is some value to that. Like actually, like, a part of boyhood initiation, like just, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. There's part of me that's like, is there some value to standing up for yourself? I mean, obviously, but
Well, I mean, we can really, whittle this down and say that, you have every right to defend yourself in the midst of a fight, and
exactly,
to
yeah.
not be a punching bag. But I think what we have to get into is sort of an interior discussion of,
Hmm.
what is my intention, what is my feeling towards my opponent, what is the outcome, how do I respond to the outcome, you know because it's
Hmm.
it's in this concept of the story. If we remove the father, right, from the equation, you know Joe Jenks goes home.
Right.
If he never encounters his father, or his father never says anything, or if his father was the opposite, right? Like, then they still just make up. They go back. They talk. Hey, I'm sorry about fighting yesterday. Oh, it's okay. Let's play again. But the problem here was the not that they had a fight, but that the father said, "You have to win this fight in order to be a man."
Mm,
So
exactly.
in your question, right? Like, you're asking, like, but, don't, are we kind of obliged to protect ourselves, to defend ourselves, to sort of stand up for ourselves? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't
Hmm.
think anyone would question that. Like, the object here is not to say you should never have a fight. If you get in a fight, you get in a fight. But are you going to squarely beat your opponent into the ground and say, I'm a man? Or are you just going to defend yourself? Hey, look, I don't really want to, I don't want to do this, but I have to sort of protect myself. And I hope you're okay on the other end of it. Like, we may never be friends again, but, my object here is not to just beat you to prove to anyone that I'm a man. Like, I don't need to prove it by being in a fight.
Exactly. I totally agree. Yeah. Um, and I think 9 times out of 10, if we really think about the things we're holding grudges over, like this instance, they are like so trivial. Just if we were to kind of take a third party position and look at it, it's like, okay, he didn't count to three. Like, can we take a few deep breaths and like relax for a bit? This isn't that big of a deal. Um, it reminds me of the song, that song From a Distance. From a
Are you,
distance,
are you going to sing the
the
whole thing for
world.
us?
Oh, I could. A little disclaimer, like I don't think that God is watching us from a distance, as the song says, but there's beauty in the song because it's like when you can just look at the earth like from the moon's point of view and all you see is blue and green and like the snow-capped mountains white as the song goes. Um and the song says, I just can't comprehend what all this fighting is for. It's like if you're looking at earth from that distance, it's like why is this going on? um, why are we killing each other? Why can't we just live at peace? And Mother Teresa said, it begins with peace in our homes. That's where it begins. And we know we can't solve the problem in Ukraine. We can't solve all these, horrible things going on in our world, but we can go home and we can forgive and let go of grudges with people in our own house. We can have the courage to say, like, okay, this person isn't perfect, but neither am I. And so I'm going to forgive them, and I'm going to, Lord, help me to be patient, because, life it's just too short to be resentful and to carry that with you. And it ultimately, the quote, it's like, um, what's it? It's like, if you forgive someone, you unchain, or like you break the shackles or something. And the
Sure.
person you realize that the person that was chained up the whole time was you. It wasn't the person you were trying to hurt through your grudge. So yeah, basically just, pray that God can help us to stop judging, and to not be so much of a competitor, but a compassionate person. And, not to get back at people with revenge, but ultimately with love, as Christ taught us to.
I like that you said sort of to be compassionate and to sort of respond with love. I would say, you know, being in the Christian faith gives us many opportunities to sort of be challenged by other opposing sides, opposing ideologies, opposing forces. Um, a lot of opposition because just strictly because we're Catholic Christians. Um, and it's interesting if you watch when something ends up in the public sphere
Hmm.
and you watch how we as Christians take on an issue,
Hmm.
like it's peaceful, it's prayer, there's no sort of violence, but then the opposing force is angry, just anger, just
Mm,
spewing just all sorts of terrible like statements and name calling and words and just such violent rhetoric, and it's like, well, wait a second, wait a second. We're the peaceful ones here. Like what? Like we're not yelling at you. We're not
right.
screaming at you. We're not like shaking our fists at you. We're just praying peacefully. But the opposition is so angry to us, right? So
Hmm. That is
the
interesting.
my point is, going back to this question of be a man. Like, what does it take to be a man? And you were talking about responding with compassion, responding with a love that's Christ-like, and I think there's also just this sense of love, compassion, understanding, patience, because what you can do, right, is we'll say we'll have, a fight with someone, and maybe it's just a fight over a belief. But if you talk, if you listen, if you give the person time, then maybe you actually have sort of a more pleasant fight, we'll say. Like you can actually have a discussion with them. You can sort of try to understand where the other person is coming from. It doesn't mean that you're going to change your belief. It doesn't mean you're going to change your core value. But but just to have, peaceful dialogue, there I think you win, in the be a man category when you can have a discussion with an opposing force. So if in the story, you know, Jimmy and Joe had been able to sort of okay, you said I didn't count to 3 before I rushed you. Here's what happened. Okay, well, here's what I observed. All right, you know
Hmm.
what? I understand why you thought that, and it's because of this. Then there's no fight, right? And there's a real representation of being a man, right? Not
Exactly.
not I beat your face into the pavement, I win, now I'm the man. Said no, we found a way to sort of get through this fight in a more peaceful way. And I think as adults, We just don't do that. We just lose that. We're like, we just want to be angry. We want to
Hmm.
fight. We want to argue in the worst way possible. And like I said, you look at it in society, how people fight with each other, and it's awful. And I'm like, you are not in any way being representative of what you should be. But
Hmm.
I could give you a lot more credit if you were sort of a peaceful protester, we'll say.
Exactly. And that's the whole irony of it. Like when he said, be a man, um, the boy took it as be childish, be like a boy. Truly being a man, like you said, would have been okay. Why are we arguing over this? What's going on? Dialoguing. Can we talk about this like mature? I mean, and then even afterward, you see that in the children, how they're interacting with each other. Like, okay, like I forgive you, whatever they said. That was more being a man, and it has nothing to do with age, as we see. Like the father was. I don't think the father was a good image of manhood. But surely the children were after the fight.
I think about scripture in the New Testament when the disciples were all sort of in the upper room
Hmm.
and the Holy Spirit comes upon them in tongues of flame, and then they're all sort of, rejuvenated to go out and spread the news of Jesus Christ to all the lands, right? And they were living, right? They had been hiding in fear. So automatically we know opposition exists outside of where they were hiding. But they had no more fear and they went out in spite of opposition to go and share the news of Christ, the love of Christ. And really, I mean, it would have been easy to say, all right, instead of, tongues of fire to equip you to spread the good news without fear, I'm going to give you all really big sticks. And you're going to go and you're going to beat everyone who doesn't acquiesce and who doesn't
Oh
come over
boy.
to believe in me, Christ the Savior. But he didn't do that. He didn't do that.
No.
The other people had, we'll say, sort of the rest of the world had the clubs. And Jesus didn't send out the apostles with clubs. He sent them out with a heart that was on fire,
Mm,
and they gave
so true.
themselves completely and to opposition, and ultimately to, to their death in many instances. But that was okay because they went out with the right mindset, with the right heart. And I have no problem saying that all of the apostles were truly men, and
Absolutely.
that they were actually truly men of God. So if we want a good example of being a man, well, let's look at the apostles and how they responded in the midst of great opposition and going out to sort of tackle the world.
I love that example. And I think really what they embodied was the love of Christ. And there's really nothing more powerful than love. Um, I was thinking like if you intimidate somebody with a stick to follow your religion or to do what you want, they will literally like they might do what you want, but they will do the absolute least they have to satisfy you. But when you act out of love for the person, like there is there's no like limit to what they will do for you. Like people give up their life out of love for Christ. So that's clearly to me that's like the most powerful thing. And yeah, just like really embodying that were the 12 apostles for sure. They gave their life, their I mean literally for Christ and for the church.
And I think that's our great call to be a real man, to be a real woman, to be a real person, a real human being.
A real organism.
Yeah, we give we give
We're
our
getting more generic. Sorry.
we give ourselves with the love of Christ to everyone out there, in spite of whatever fight may await us. But we always approach
Right.
those fights, those tensions, those moments. We always approach it with a love that is based off of Christ.
And I think Christ on the cross is like the image of what manhood is. I think there's no greater image than that.
The great sacrifice
Right.
as the image of being a man. Sure. I can absolutely see that and agree with you.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike and I have been discussing the short story by James G. Bruen Jr., Be a Man. Again, if you haven't heard it yet, if you want to hear Mike Thimons read it, and if you want to hear him do some voice work,
I do some awesome
does
voice
some awesome
work.
voice work. Go listen to Be a Man. Find it at our YouTube channel or our website for WAOB Audio Theater. And we hope that maybe we all can find our better paths to being better people for the world,
Exactly.
because the world needs us right now. Mike Thimons, thank you so much. Always good to talk with you.
You too. Don't ever let anyone beat you. That's my my going away words. No, just kidding. Be a man. And you know what that is if you've listened thus far.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Table of Content. We hope that you will tune in again for another episode. And as always, until that time, be good, stay safe, peace.